everybody, and welcome to another episode of Attachment Theory in Action. Today, I am excited to welcome Donny Frank to the podcast. Donny is a licensed marriage and family therapist who has been helping couples and families connect for over 25 years. His clinical practice and worldwide workshops are influenced by his training in leadership relationship approaches, such as the Imago relationship therapy and Gottman methods, EFT, CBT, and NLP. In fact, the communication handbook featured in the second part of his book is largely based on IRT's highly effective couples dialogue. Driven by his passion for people and his deep respect for the institutions of marriage and family, Donny's extensive experience and wealth of knowledge, coupled with a balanced demeanor, practical approach, and creative nature, all contribute to his practice and presentations. These qualities are also the ingredients that make his book a game changer for couples seeking connection. Well, hi, Donny. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Attachment Theory in Action. I'm very pleased to welcome you and talk a little bit about your work and your book that you have recently brought out on the making of a dynamic duo, a couple's guide to connection. Really excited to hear about that. First of all, though, Donny, I would just love to hear what kind of got you to where you are today? How did you get into this field of working with couples and kind of realizing that connection is the key?
Okay, well, thanks for having me, Christy. And what I know about the work that you do excites me because I think we're all in this together, trying to strengthen families, build a strong and healthy future through our kids, and it's all through family. So I'm a marriage and family therapist, and that's what I do pretty much most of my day. I do some trainings, but I am in the laboratory working with couples, learning about relationships, helping people get to good places. I try to think back as to what brought me into this field. And I think my best answer to that is, and I thought about going to education. My father was a master educator, so it was a service field. And I guess maybe that was some kind of an influence. And somehow the idea of working with families. Now, I have to say that my entry into the world of mental health was not really with a focus on helping in the areas of specifically mental health. I actually came in because I wanted to help families. It was a very specific passion of mine. So, and eventually I got there, through the work that I had done, working with agencies initially. But it was very intriguing and very attractive to me to see if there was some way that I could help with families. I started working close to 30 years ago in the field of marriage and family. And at that point, it wasn't as regulated, the field that it is today. Mm-hmm. And I guess I don't know exactly what was the turning point as to when many of the states, including New York, decided that it was time to regulate the field. I suspect there must have been some realization that families need help and they need good help. Mm-hmm. So I'm probably, I think I'm 579, license number in New York, marriage and family therapist. So that's pretty early on, and it really was able to be a career of mine, just to help families. And as hard as it may be, as challenging as it might be, but there's nothing more rewarding than, for me at least, helping a family come together again and be strong and healthy and be in a connected relationship. We'll talk about connection, I guess. That was the second part of the question. But so I just feel I'm actually doing what I believe is a passion of mine, helping families.
Do you feel that connection and relationship was something that really stood out to you in your experience within your own family?
I don't know when I actually started to articulate for myself that connection was a key to good relationships. And in fact, it's interesting because you speak to couples and you want to find out where they're holding. So a good gauge is to see how connected they are. But then how do you quantify it? How to quantify connection. And couples will sometimes say, I just don't feel connected. And feelings are tricky. We can't always, bank on them as being an accurate reflection of reality. It's our reality, but made up a reflection of reality. But when it comes to connection, I think sometimes that is the way to really understand if you're in a connected relationship. So to articulate, I don't know, but I do believe that, attachment theory is very big today. It's become, it's a lot of writing on it, and it's become part of the research. But I actually kind of think that certain things are just intuitive. If
Mhm.
you're a human being living on this planet, you probably realize at some point in time that the key to your happiness is to be in a connected relationship. And that when you're not connected, it's kind of like yucky, It's not really enjoyable to be in life when you don't have human connections. So I
Right.
think it's intuitive. I don't think you need scientific, support for it, but it's always nice to have it.
No, yeah, absolutely. You know what? Something that I'm thinking about as you're speaking is this idea of being able to quantify connection. How do we quantify it? And I think, one, I think it's very, very hard to. But I'm also thinking about if we go back to that, the simplest definition of attachment, when we're talking about in child development, and between that child and caregiver, child and parent, those the children go to the adults for safety, um, for experiences of reciprocal joy, um, and that makes me wonder about are those things that we should look at in that adult relationship, in that couple relationship, as a way of quantifying connection. You know, do we have moments of reciprocal joy with our significant other? Do we feel safe, both physically and more importantly, emotionally safe with our significant other? And are those ways to quantify our level of connection?
Well, reciprocal joy is a feeling again. So I guess I would
Mhm.
probably include that in, just feel, and the feeling might be joy, reciprocal
Mhm.
joy with each other. There are symptoms of connected relationships. We can talk, we can share, we can make ourselves vulnerable, and not and not be not worry that we're going to be invalidated or rejected by it for it. So those are symptoms. So you don't just rely on the emotional description of connection, but what goes on in your relationship.
Mhm.
What are the symptoms of a connected couple specifically? Um, it's interesting also that I came across years ago in the Wall Street Journal. There was an article that they were saying that the corporate world was including marriage um, training and workshops in a list of professional training. So what connections have to work? And of course, they said because if a person's struggling at home and doesn't have their relationships in order, they're not going to work as well. They're going to bring that stuff to the workplace. Triggers that go on at home are going to be re-triggered when they get to the workplace. So they also, you can sometimes see work production, see like how you're handling the rest of your life. Can you trace it back to a problem in your most intimate relationships?
Mhm.
So there are a lot of ways to recognize that the person is just not flowing in life. And as I said before, I think as social beings, we know that if you live long enough and you pay attention to relationships, we're in a very good place when we're connected. In fact, I think the research also indicates that the degree to which a person is impacted by trauma. Not everybody that experiences the same events will
Mhm.
experience, official, clinical trauma. Very close human connections is a way to protect oneself from the impact of trauma. So many different
Absolutely.
ways that connection is obviously, what we as human beings need to be functional and successful and productive and happy.
Isn't it so funny though how quickly people seem to forget that? I
Oh gosh.
feel, you know. So yeah, we know that connection is so vital. And what I always love to pull out too is these parallel processes that we know for a child connection is vital. Yet as we seem to get older, we just forget that the same things apply to us as adults, that it's still vital for us to have that connection, to have that secure relationship, that psychological home base to go to in order to, as you said, protect us from the ramifications of a trauma experience. And so it really does surprise it just always surprises me how quickly we seem to forget those pieces. And also then looking at it from, if we flip it over, that so often we forget how valuable it is for our children. So we have children coming to us who are manifesting and displaying these symptoms of a lack of connection, their behaviors and their emotions and their dysregulation. And as adults, we forget how vital that connection piece is. I've worked with so many adults across different areas, whether they be teachers or parents or somebody who is working in a helping profession role with children and families, who are so kind of derailed by the behaviors in front of them, and they forget the vital importance of that connecting relationship.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting how you describe it as forget. That's how they forget about the importance of providing that connection or that experience for their kids. Um, what does it mean they would forget? I mean, I wonder what. Yeah, I think it's true that we sometimes don't provide what we know, or somehow deep down we know we ought to provide. But what blocks us from it? Are we forgetting?
Or is
Or
something in the
what's
way of
happening?
it? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think you bring up a very valid point. And maybe I'm a little unfair in my use of the word forget. I think you're right that often it's from my experience, often it's our own stuff that gets in the way of being able to keep that connection at the forefront. And actually, I think this is a great moment to bring this in, and I'd love for you to explain your CEO's concepts to us, because one of the concepts that owning up to what makes it difficult for you is a big piece of being able to recognize what's gone on for you and what's creating barriers for your connection. So tell us a bit more about these concepts, Donny.
Okay. Yeah. So I was going to go in the direction that you took it. Not so much the forgetting, but really about getting in the way, that we get in our own way of success, and so that if we talk about parenting, and it could be the same true with the spouse or anybody else that we're interacting with. If someone says something and does something, and we take it personally, all bets are off. That we have reactions that are not very connectful. And so really say the five word strategy, intervention, secret to success in all relationships is basically get out of the way. And there you have it. Couch it in any psychological terms you want to use, but that's what it comes down to. Just get out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the question then becomes, so why is it so hard to get out of the way? Well, one answer is obvious, because we're hurt and we're in pain, and it's hard for us sometimes as parents, let's say, to remind ourselves, oh, they're not second, you're the parent. So, there's different expectations of your way of interacting with your child and your child interacting with you. It's not a relationship of equals. Mm-hmm. That argument doesn't hold true with spouses, because it is a relationship of equals. So that's a different discussion. But when we are in pain or struggling, or our kids do things that really get under our skin, it's hard for us to say, okay, we get out of the way and just stay present for them. That's, I guess, maybe the obvious reason why we don't facilitate connection in those moments. Or it could be that not because there's anything the kids did that might have frustrated us. Sometimes it's because we're working very hard to make a living, and there are frustrations at work, and we come back home, and we can't always be at the top of our game, even though we should be. But we can't always be at the top of our game. There could be stressful days, and but that's all one category of, I think, why as parents we don't always come through the way we should.
Before you move on,
Okay.
I want to highlight what you just said because I try to express that when I'm working with caregivers is that, sadly in our world, there are people that don't treat children how they should be treated. But it's not always that case. Sometimes the case is that you're working two jobs, you're trying to make ends meet, life is very stressful, but you're doing the best that you can with what you have. And I think that's so important to highlight that we're not trying to make parents out as monsters. We recognize that life happens, and it's okay to have those moments of disrepair, of disconnection.
Mhm.
Um, the vital piece is what do you do after the fact, and how do you repair that connection? So I'm so glad that
For
you
sure.
brought that up.
Actually, there's so much to say about that piece too. And I definitely agree with you to the point actually that one of my people ask me what's the book, what's the theme of the book, if I can give it to in a nutshell. I just if you look at the cover, you'll see what it really captures, the underlying principle of relationships. So I have a copy here. I'll show you the cover. Just
Sure.
for those who haven't seen it. Are we on video?
We are on video.
Okay, fine. So this is my dynamic duo. I mean, the graph actually starts on the back page. And dynamic duos are not people whose trend goes straight up. It's not like we hardly find a financial investment that only climbs and climbs and climbs and has no dips. This is what we want to see happen with a couple. Successful couples, those who graduate marriage therapy, are still having their disconnects. There's no promise there'll be no disconnect. And almost to the point that if you're living under the same roof and you're really interacting, you are going to have moments of rupture. But these people know how to trend upward. They know how to be able to repair the ruptures and get back into connection and develop the connection until the next rupture. And that's it. This is the dynamic duo. They're ups, mostly ups, sometimes downs. I think one of the ways I like to say it is that the masters in relationships, their ruptures happen less frequently, less intensity, and at longer durations,
Mhm.
but they will happen.
I love your use of the words. They know how to trend upwards, you
So
know?
it's trending upward. You evaluate a couple and you say, "How you guys doing?" Don't give me a moment. Don't give me a moment in your relationship. Give me the trend.
Mm,
But trending upward. And that's how we'd evaluate any financial investment. How is it trending? Not in any given day in the market. And the same thing, I'd invest in a couple if I know they're trenders, they trend upward. Um, so that's with couples, that's with parenting. The problem with parenting um, is that whereas we can teach adults to have perspective, which I think is probably one of the most adult skills, almost like what defines an adult is an ability to take someone else's perspective.
mhm, mhm,
We can teach it to an adult, and adults are expected to be able to recognize they're not the only person in the relationship, and someone could do something wrong, but you can understand where they're coming from. You can understand their stresses, their difficult day, or whatever might have animated them. Um, when you can take perspective, you can go on a trend like this. You can recover. Problem is, the kids don't necessarily know how to take perspective, and we don't necessarily expect them to take perspective. You're not going to tell the 5-year-old, listen, your dad really loves you. You can try, but there's no expectation they're going to get it. So parents have to really just kind of do what they can, keep on getting, keep on working on themselves to become better and better, recognizing that until that kid becomes an adult, they'll never get their day, so to speak, in court. There'll never be a point when the kid will understand what stresses might have been going on for the parents
mhm,
as they were growing up. When we talk about adult children work who are struggling with, their formative years and where they really did not have a perspective of what was going on for the parents. And as a result of that, they maintained their view of what was going on when they saw it at 5 and they're seeing it the same way at 35. Then maybe we have a chance to help them be able to gain perspective. And I think you said earlier, like, your parents loved you and they did the best they could.
mhm,
They weren't trying to hurt you, even in the moments when you felt hurt by them.
mhm,
But that's adult work, and for parents, we have to be able to say we're not going to get the benefit of the doubt. No kids are going to give us that benefit of the doubt in the formative years, at least. So yeah, but that's the challenge. So the challenge is we do have, we're not perfect. And I don't say we're not perfect because that's ridiculous. We're not close to perfect. We have a lot of imperfections,
Mhm.
and I think parents need strength, need encouragement to say, just, get back on, hold on to that steering wheel, keep on driving, don't give up, don't get discouraged.
And be
Next day,
prepared to get out of the way.
and get out of the way. Get out of the way. Right.
Um, Something that you said really rings true to me, in that you said that the teaching somebody and helping them learn how to take perspective is the adult work, because uh, we can't expect a 5-year-old to be able to do it. We also can't expect a 14-year-old to be able to do it. Anyone who's out there and has had
The age
children
is
who
getting
are now
higher and higher.
adults.
The age is getting higher and higher as the generations go on.
Right.
Expect a 35-year-old.
um, but I love that distinction, because in the work that we do, a lot of our work with children and adolescents is based on the feeling piece of things, that especially if we know a child has experienced trauma as well as a disruption in their attachment relationship, we know that often those children and adolescents are in back brain. Their front brain is not switched on. This is not the time to have a conversation about, well, how do you take somebody else's perspective? What are they thinking? And so much of our work is spent on how it feels to be in a safe, secure, healthy relationship. Um, and so I just really appreciate that distinction. I think so often we try to have conversations and talk therapy with children and young people without remembering that, either their brain is not in the right place to do those therapies, or that they've not had enough life experience of healthy relationships and what it looks like when somebody takes somebody else's perspective, to be able to understand those high level concepts.
Correct. I agree with you 100%. I think it's, the interventions with the younger the kids would be what I would probably do as well. And helping parents understand that the kids are not ready for that kind of work. And so you have to deal with the emotional experience, and, and not have the benefit of them understanding why it is you might have gotten frustrated. I just would caution, if I would say, just my own humble, like, thought about this is, although that might be the just right intervention for kids, like you say, maybe 10 years old, 5 years old, 10 years old, maybe 14 years old, but at some point it switches. And unfortunately, I think that sometimes therapists stay in that mode, even when they're dealing with adult children who could be challenged to start considering perspective. So I
Mhm.
think there's got to be a shift at some point of development, and not continue to treat them as kids, take a step.
Yeah. So maybe just to provide some clarification, at least for yourself and some of our listeners, perhaps. So the work that we do at Chaddock, we have a very specific treatment model that is pyramid based. And so when we're working with, whether it be a child or a parent or a caregiver, what we are able to do is base the work that we're doing in the moment on which part of the brain that person is working from. So if I remember being in sessions with a 15-year-old, for example, and we're in that top part of the pyramid where we're really doing maybe some CBT type work,
Mhm.
maybe working on some trauma narrative. But if I'm able to then recognize that my client is really going back into back brain, that something's triggering that back brain response, based on what we're talking about, then we know that we can put that CBT, that TFCBT aside,
Mhm.
and move back into, how do I create this felt safety again for this client in this moment? And so I completely agree with what you're saying. And not only from that therapy perspective, but also from at some point in our adult life, we have to look at our accountability and the responsibility. Um, that, and I was actually just talking to a young person about this recently, that, you know, they're discussing about getting a potential diagnosis, and my comment was, well, what does that mean? Okay, so you get this label, what does that mean? Because really, with this particular diagnosis we were talking about, there is a lot of internal work that has to take place. I said, you're not going to fix this by just meeting with a therapist once every couple of weeks. It takes effort on your part and an intention to make that shift. And so I agree with what you're saying, that at some point we have to push, but also provide space for that person to practice and learn how to take that perspective of others.
Yeah. I'm with you 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
But I like the fact that we have the luxury to be able to say, we're not just tied into doing high level thinking therapy. If we know that our client is not in that space to do that,
Right.
we have other tools in our toolbox to return to.
Right. Yep. Got it. Yeah. It's
Tell me,
actually,
go
I just,
ahead.
there's actually there was, we're talking about what is it that blocks people from providing the connections, whether forgetting or getting in the way, and maybe the next level that we have to be careful with is to say, why do we get in the way? So our pain doesn't let us, get past it, so we get reactive instead of being focused on what really the child needs from us. Um, but I also think that we have to be careful, especially clinicians. But it's really a societal trend that's been going on for quite a long time already, but it's really becoming more and more pronounced, is the focus on self. One of the other principles, the book is actually broken up into how dynamic duos think, like the mindset of a dynamic duo, and then how do they execute those ideas. But I think that in order to become a dynamic duo, you have to think about relationships in a similar way, and then learn the skills to be able to execute all that stuff.
Mhm.
So one of the very, very, I think, at least as far as I'm concerned, one of the most fundamental aspects of mindset of a dynamic duo is that successful marriages and relationships are generally driven by a desire to give to another, support another, and if it means love another, what are the aspects of love that you do in order to be able to help the other?
Mhm.
Two people coming together whose goals are not to get their needs met as much as it is to get the needs of the other met. And I'm talking about codependency, talking about two healthy people, but their highest value is to give. Now, when I my first version of the book didn't have the first chapter, where I established this as a principle of dynamic duos, and I didn't put it in there because I thought it was obvious. I didn't even think that it needed to be a chapter. I didn't want to write stuff in the book that people would say, "Okay, next." But then I realized that it's just so important. Sometimes the most important things are not articulated, and we forget about them. But we're living in a time where we already know it. We could probably point to in a million different places where this is true, but it's become so focused on self-actualization, self-fulfillment, self-care. Everything is self, but that's not how relationships succeed. That isn't where connection happens. Um, so, in addition, I would say more than just the fact that we don't get out of the way because we're struggling in a situation. Sometimes we don't get out of the way philosophically. We say, I'm entitled.
Mm.
I'm entitled to be respected, and it's about me. And I heard somebody say something to me one time, and I have to tell you, to me, it was very it kind of shocked me when I was told by somebody who was identifying the people in their life that they were no longer relating to. And the expression the person said to me was, they lost the privilege to have a relationship with me.
Mm.
Now, I understand needs to distance. I understand, in order to be able to give, you have to be able to be intact. There are rules for self-care that help us. But the goal of life is to see how I can make the world a better place. I hate to be so cliche about it, but that's really what it is, lift the people around us, make the world a better place. It's not how many years can I get the world to serve me until it's over. And that kind of comment made me realize that we've gone really far. And that could lead somebody to say the same thing, I come first. So don't ask me to set myself aside.
Mhm.
Philosophically, I don't do that anymore. So
Mhm.
it's not, sometimes it's not just because we lost ourselves in a frustration, but it becomes philosophical. It's a much more challenging issue to resolve. Yeah.
I do feel that we have, as a society, gone from almost from one extreme to the other.
Mhm.
That we've gone from completely self-sacrificing uh, to use your word, kind of self-entitlement,
Mhm.
and we've lost this middle ground of both of us. When I say when I'm in a relationship with somebody else, both of us giving for the
Mhm.
better good of the other person,
Mhm.
to better the other person.
Right.
um and I like some of the words that you used, about self-care, and thinking about the self. I feel like there is a difference between the work that I would love to see so many adults doing is becoming more self-aware.
Mm.
And to me, that's different to getting this self-entitlement, this
For sure.
feeling
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
it's all about me.
Hmm.
There's some big differences there. And I think that for us in our work with adults is helping them understand those differences, and that we do want you to focus on yourself,
Hmm.
but not in that entitlement sense. We want you to focus on what are the things that I can do so that I can be better at giving in this relationship, giving and maybe receiving in this relationship.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, but that's exactly how I see it. I mean, I think of self-care. Um, you take a long journey and you gotta take a pit stop, got a rest stop. You have to refuel. If you don't refuel, you're gonna break down the highway. So nobody wants that. You can't be a giver. So it's really, that's why I say I frame it as life is about giving, and but I need to make sure that I can be a strong and effective giver. So I take those breaks from parenting, marriage, in every relationship where I need to be a giver, I have to keep refueling. But you don't get stuck at the rest stop, see that as the end game, and forget about the ride. That's not the destination. It's really where it gets you to the destination. So yeah, yeah. So kind of putting it back into, I think the way historically we've understood self-care, we have to go back to that and not let it suddenly take on a life of its own, and that becomes the end. But as I say, relationships, parenting, marriage, we have to really be careful that it doesn't become like one of the things I wrote in the introduction was, dynamic duos don't read books about how to get your needs met. They read books on how
Mhm.
to meet the needs of others. Like that's what my target is. I want to know what makes my spouse happy. I want to know what helps them become more fulfilled. I want to know what helps them develop their goals. And I'm going to try to do the best I can to provide it. That drives dynamic duos. Yeah.
I'm sitting here because I'm really thinking about what you're saying, and trying to think about applying it to my own life and my own relationships. As somebody who has a young child now, often I find myself falling into that competition trap of, in my mind, well, I did this today and I did this today and you didn't do this. And I have to really rein myself in and say, this isn't, as you said, this isn't about meeting my needs.
Hmm.
It's about supporting the other person and
Right.
ensuring that really that both of our needs are met, but that our child's needs are met first and
Hmm.
foremost.
Right.
But it is, and I don't know if it's a personal thing or if it's been impacted by society and the changes, as you said, that we've become a whole lot more self-centered. Maybe that's a good word to use.
Hmm.
Um, but it's hard. It is really hard not to fall into that trap of putting my needs solely first.
Yeah. 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 You mentioned earlier it was a good distinction. You mentioned self-aware, and self-aware. I guess you even describing your own personal self-awareness in terms of the your child. And the CEO protocols that I have in the book, you had mentioned that before, that after each chapter, we run through, you're both, the couple are both running this enterprise called marriage. So the CEOs of this marriage want to reflect back on each chapter. That's the idea. So the C is to confirm that what is stated in that chapter is something that the two agree should be part of their marital mandate, the
Mhm.
concept that's brought there, the strategy that is indicated in the book, that we both agree that this should be something that we incorporate into our marriage. The reason why I say that, by the way, is that not everything is said is worthy of being said. Not everything that's written is worthy of being, read. And I fully understand that in the 60 or 70 ideas that I put out there for couples, some people might push back against some of them and say this doesn't work for us. It's
Mhm.
not, either philosophically, spiritually, or practically, it doesn't work for us. So I say in the book, just tear that page out and keep going.
Mhm.
Just keep going, and whatever you feel you want to adapt. So that's the C for confirm. And if they confirm the idea, then the E is are there examples in their relationship where that concept that had been talked about in the chapter shows up in their specific marriage. The O is ownership. And that's asking the question. We know it's right because we confirmed that this was something we ought to be doing in our relationship. We have examples that we're not doing it. But instead of pointing the finger and saying it's not happening because you, so dynamic duos, another quality of dynamic duos is what could I be doing differently in order to help generate success? Where do I struggle? What's the hardest part for me to execute what the chapter spoke about? And without that, you don't complete the protocol. It's not, we're not going to use the book properly. There has to be an idea of self-awareness, what blocks me, and then of course the S of the CEO. CEO is part of protocol. We throw the S in there because so now that you found out what blocks you, what do you think? What strategy do you need in order to be able to get past that blockage?
Mhm.
That mindset has to run through every strategy and insight that you ever read about, not just in this book. Anytime you read something or get exposed to an idea, relationships or life itself, but let's say relationships, check it out. Does it resonate? Is it something you want to take on? If yes, how does it show up in your relationship? And why isn't it happening as often as it should? Reflect and see what you could be doing differently to make it happen. So that's
Mhm.
part of the mindset, runs through all the chapters. Self-awareness, you say, self-awareness. We won't get to connection if we're not going to be self-aware.
I really I love the probably you might not agree with this as you were the one that has written this book, but I love the simplicity of those steps that you just described. And as I said, it probably didn't come very simply as you were writing. It's a big process. So not to diminish from your experience, but to me, I love the simplicity of what you just those steps that you just described. To me, it's like, okay, yeah, this really makes sense to
Mm-hmm.
me, how this could help me be more successful in my relationships with other people. But I also have to remember that I've done a lot of work in being self-aware and
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability, and those are some things that come
More
easier
naturally.
to me than it does to a lot of people. And
That's a good.
so I can certainly also appreciate how hard it might be for an individual and couple together to come and hear those and think, oh, that this is a big ask that you're asking of me.
Yes, yes. It's a I don't know if when you were hesitant to use the word, I guess, simple or and how I'd react to it. And I have to tell you, I did get, I got feedback so far since the book has come out. And the one feedback that I got that was most meaningful to me was someone who now became part of our website, but the person had written two words to describe the book, which was simply brilliant or something like that. I forgot the second word. I forgot they said the second word, but the word simple was what I was aiming for. I know for myself, books on self-help, some that they're sometimes very
Hmm.
heavy in terms of, just in terms of volume, the amount of words that are used to describe concepts. and a lot of research and just heavy content. And you really have to set your mind. You have to really be in a frame of mind to read it and absorb it. And I worked really, really hard. I mean, probably the hardest, probably the part that I worked hardest on in this book was keep chapters as short as they are,
Hmm.
as simple as I could possibly write it. And it's got cartoons and metaphors for each one of the chapters. And so I want it to be simple. Relationships don't have to be complicated. We have to, they're not complicated. They're hard. Relationships are hard, but they don't have to be so complicated. You don't have to analyze things and make things clinical. We're people with strengths and weaknesses, and the vast majority of people are good people who are just trying to do the right thing. We make lots of mistakes, and then so I have to move it a little bit more towards the lighter side of relationships. Again, very important, a lot of hard work, but in terms of how to make it, what goes into making a successful relationship, it's not so complicated.
Hmm. I completely agree with you. I always I try to share this with people that I train and speak to, and that uh, everything that we do when we try to build relationships with children is what we should be doing to build relationships with each other, with our peers and our colleagues.
Correct. Mhm.
It just looks a little bit different and sounds a bit different because we're bigger and our brains are more developed. But I love that's to me, that's really what you're saying is that it doesn't have to be complicated. Yes, it can get hard sometimes,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
we all, providing we have had examples of healthy connection and relationships, we all have these skills inside of us. Just we have to get out of the way, right? I love going back to your
That's it.
statement.
That's
We have to realize that we do have the ability to use those CEO strategies, that we can look at what's going on for us. We can decide whether it's important for us to continue with that or not, and then own the things that make it hard for us.
right.
Um, we have those skills within us,
Mhm.
but things get in the way.
Right. Right. Yeah.
um, so as we wrap up, Donny, obviously it's been wonderful having you on here. I like to challenge my guests with a little bit of my question to you is, what would be one thing that you would like, let's say parents and caregivers as couples, um, what would you like for them to kind of take away from our session today or our time together today, or something that you feel is really valuable for them to know, like something that you want them to take away with them?
Oh my. Um, so maybe I guess recognizing this, let me say it this way. The system of child rearing, the fact that parents raise kids has been around since I guess the first child was born, right? And there hasn't been equality in quality of parents. Like you're born into a set of parents, and can't say it. We didn't. We don't have a system where everybody gets raised by the same exact,
Mhm.
set of people, and therefore when they get to the age of, I don't know, 15, 20, and they go off in the world, they can all look at each other and say, look, we had the same circumstances, and I came out like this, you came out like that, so we can start judging ourselves. And it's not how life works. It's a very interesting system in which people raise people. And oftentimes the people that are raising people are, although the kids might look at them as giants, parents, whoa, my mother's 25 years old. Say, that's just a kid, and she's trying to figure life out. She just came through a transition. She's having a baby, juggling, whatever. It's people raising people. Really, listen, I think we just can't forget that whenever we deal with relationships with human beings, there's going to be good moments, there's going to be challenging moments. And if we could just develop the ability to cut slack, and of course there's exceptions, and I'm not getting into the real dysfunctional stuff, but
Right.
overall, there's ups and downs, and people have strengths and weaknesses. And sometimes I just tell, I started with couples, I say to them, I know this may sound, couples are giving me a very hard time. And I just say, let's see where the threshold over here is with the two of you. Do you think that your spouse is a good person and trying to, uh, not like that. Do you think your spouse is a bad person trying to hurt you?
Mhm.
No, no, he's a good person. She's a good person. They're not trying to hurt me. They are hurting me, but they're not trying to hurt me. That's, if you start there, we can work on this. They're not trying to hurt me. Yes, they are causing pain, but they're not trying to hurt me. Let's just cut slack. Let's learn how to cut slack and let people be human.
Mhm.
Kids will have a hard time doing it when they're younger, as we discussed before. But to the extent to which we can do that for our kids, for our spouses, for our friends, the people we interact with, it's cut slack. I think that's maybe two words. We have get out of the way as one and cut slack the other way. Don't
Well,
try
and
to.
if I might add, let's focus on trending upwards. I really
Oh,
love
of course, of
that
course,
terminology.
of course,
Um,
100%. Don't get discouraged by the dips. Just get back on the train, get back on the road to connection. We talk about it, the road to connection. You know,
I love that. Love that. Well, Donny, thank you so much for joining me
my
today. It
pleasure.
has
Thank you for having
been
me. Really enjoyed the
wonderful.
conversation.
And
Okay.
I look forward to reading your book.
Okay, great. I'd love to, I'd love to hear your feedback on it too. So,
Thank
good
you.
luck on you and your work. And like I said, let's, we're doing the same kind of work, helping families, and really the future of civilization, society, healthy societies, productive societies. It's all a nuclear family. That's what I think it is. So it's big. It's big stuff.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. Have a great day.